My mom is black and my dad is white, and in 1997 they traveled to the Caribbean to get married. In all of their pictures, they look like a happy married couple, but what you can't see is that back in their home state of South Carolina, it was still illegal for them to get married due to a constitutional ban on interracial marriage. Most people felt that this ban was just a placeholder as it was no longer enforceable under Supreme Court ruling, but to my parents, it represented racial oppression. On June 25, 2015, another placeholder was called into question when Bree Newsom, an African-American activist from Charlotte, North Carolina, climbed the Confederate flagpole and took down the flag from the South Carolina State House grounds. Newsom disobeyed the law, but she did so to give a voice to her community against the divisive flag for the purpose of its removal and for the unification of race. To do so, she used an artifact that is typically disregarded in everyday life to bring attention to the power it has in minority communities to make us feel racially oppressed. People walked and drove past this flag every day, but up until 2015, most people didn't recognize its meaning. Newsom calls her community to action by begging them to leave normality behind to fight for racial unity. She argues that by continuing in the same routine of flying the Confederate flag, it will continue in the same routine of racism. She breaks people's ignorance to this flag to create a collective fight against it and for its removal to unify our races. Newsom then brings attention to the implications of the ideologies that are supported by the flag's placement, such that white communities fly this flag because they find it to be commonplace that represents American autonomy and a representative government. But African Americans struggle to move past the ideology that we are uneducated slaves and 3/5 of a person. So protecting the flag under the guise of Trump support and conservatism will only perpetuate racism in our culture and allow our governments to show a lack of support for progress in black communities. So climbing the flagpole is Newsom's way of arguing that the placement of the flag on State House grounds is the inability for the South Carolinian government to move past their historically racist tendencies, and that the removal of the flag will then result in racial unification. As a black woman, Newsom forces her audience to see how the flag is perceived and the culture it encourages. She argues that it ostracizes minority communities because African Americans cannot share in the ideologies that are supported by the flag. So if the flag doesn't include all, and not every single American citizen can partake in the enterprise for unification, then the goal of a unified American culture cannot happen when we continue to fly the Confederate flag. Newsom's actions then put pressure on the keystone of infrastructure of South Carolina, its government, by calling out its biases and questioning its interest in racial unification. The government is the backbone of South Carolina, therefore its actions reflect on the ideologies of its people. So celebrating racism on the governmental level will only extend an invitation to South Carolinians to continue this in their everyday lives. So climbing the flagpole is Newsom's argument that the infrastructure of South Carolina is built on minority communities who are not being accurately represented by the flag. So removing the flag will then recognize that these minorities are just as much South Carolinians as white people are, and this recognition is the first step towards racial unification. Newsom's voice carried throughout the country that day, and her civic engagement worked. On July 10, 2015, the South Carolina State Legislature voted to have the flag removed from State House grounds permanently. This marked the dissolution of systemic racism in South Carolina. That day, Newsom gave a voice to a community that felt like they didn't have one when she engaged in the fight for racial acceptance. She told African Americans that we are no longer to be seen just as descendants of slaves. She told people like my parents that they are, in fact, welcome. And she told people like me, young African Americans, that change is possible. Thank you.